Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So in today's message, I want to share some thoughts around awareness and mindfulness and how that can serve to protect us. And so, there's a verse in the Bible, and I didn't actually write it down, but I'm sure you can recall this. But it's talking about having the ears to hear and the eyes to see. And it's also really interesting to look back on all of these, just old stories that have been passed down through generations. And after you've gone through certain experiences in your life, and to look back on those and then start, drawing correlations from those over to, religion. And I'm talking about just multiple, different religions, right? And seeing these same themes in everywhere in movies and music and poetry, old poetry, and throughout time. And they're all centered on stories that include a villain, and trying to warn everyone to be on alert and to guard themselves, and because there are truly actual human predators, not just predatory animals, but unfortunately humans as well. And so it's kind of like, I think I'm gonna share my perspective on this, which is really everything on my channel anyway, right? My perspective. Well, I do share others' perspectives, but what I've come to understand is basically, if you didn't have a really jarring, unsettling experience, in your younger years, and maybe it was just later in your life, like for me, and I'm talking about like totally rocked your world, because a lot of times we can have things happen to us for many, many years on end, like decades, and it can affect us in a very bad, negative way, and we're totally unconscious of it until this larger, bigger event happens later in our life that is so shocking and jarring that it kind of shakes you awake, it wakes you up, and then from that point forward, you're changed. We talk about that a lot on my channel. You're forever changed, but it's also giving you a new lens to look through, right? Like you're putting on glasses and you can see clearly now, right? All of these other things from your past that you were totally blind to before. And so that's kind of what's happened too when you have these new set of lenses. For example, when you're looking back over all these ancient stories, recorded in holy books throughout time, and myth and folklore and fairy tale and all this, right? Legends of old. It's like they're all trying to teach us and warn us, and it comes off like fantasy, see? And that's hard, because I think that, I think that's done for multiple reasons. I've read a little bit indicating that truths are wrapped up and stored and secured and preserved, really, in story form for actual processing within the psyche. That it's kind of like when a really big truth is presented to us just point blank. And this kind of makes sense now that I have gone through what I have. If you're in a particular frame of mind, okay, where you are kind of stunned, or you're under this spell, or what the Bible calls a curse, you're blind, you don't have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. If you're in that state because you have already fallen victim to a predatory individual, then point blank truth, it's just gonna go right over your head. It's not going to register. And so for some reason, when a truth is presented to us, and this is just one facet, okay, one side of a multifaceted reasoning, I think, but when it's presented to us in story form, it bypasses that denial center, that's under the curse of this controlling person, and it registers more deeply somewhere else within our psyche, and it kind of just sits there and it marinates, You know what I'm saying? And it's like running in the background, you know, subconsciously. And then later, when you're ready, or when your emotions are under control, or you're out of this threatening environment, you're in a safer, more peaceful environment, whatever it is, when the conditions have changed or shifted, you know, at that point, see, you have this information, these big truths stored, so that they're going to pop up. This has been my experience. And it's like, oh, that's what that meant. Oh, I get it now. Oh, now I can draw these, you know, these correlations, you know, and you can find the similarities and how things compare. And they're like parallels, and they're all supporting one another. It's kind of like, I know there's a lot of different truths out there in this human experience, and there's a lot of different experiences in general, but that's just one major theme that I've now been able to identify. And the thing is, you know, you might be saying, like I'm imagining myself like 20 years ago, you might be saying, well, yeah, I know there's quote unquote bad people, or people who have bad intentions, right? Predatory people in the world. I know that. Well, that's what I would have said too. But the thing is, I think what we miss is that it's actually prevalent. It's like, unfortunately, a greater percentage than what we initially may have thought. And so it's going to cause us to be more on guard more of the time, you know, as opposed to just thinking that we already know what to look for, and then at that point we can raise our guard and put it up and protect ourselves. See, I've learned that's not the best way to operate. It's better to operate guarded to start with, right? And then once you're really sure it's okay to let it down, you're going to let it down. But see, it's all going to depend on this perception filter, right? This paradigm that you've already constructed in your mind, and you're operating from it, right? And if you have this incorrect paradigm to start with, and you're filtering everything, all of your perception through it, because we all have a subjective reality. We all have our own perceptions, you know? And when you're filtering through an incorrect paradigm structure, or thought structure, belief system, whatever, then you're going to be blind to things that are just right in front of your eyes, right in front of your face. And I'll give you an example. I've seen, I would say over the last 10 years, I haven't seen so many lately, but probably I saw a lot happening within a short amount of time, probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I would just pull up at a gas station and I would see a drug deal going down. And this is just like a, you know, not necessarily an area where crime was, you know, high or whatever statistically, but just a, you know, and it was just happening frequently. They would be parked right in front of the doors of this very well lit, very popular and populated gas station, and it'd just be going down right there in front of everybody. And that's what you call hiding in plain sight, see? And that makes sense, I would imagine, if you're trying to get away with something like that. If you're thinking that, you know, law enforcement is going to be looking for you over here, you know, hiding around the corner where nobody can see you, you know. So it's like, that's just an example of how things can just get by you and you miss it completely because you think you know what to look for, see. And so we can apply that same logic in our lives and better learn how to better correct any gaps or holes in our armor, and shield ourselves and protect ourselves from people with bad intentions, right? So that's going to be the heart of the message today. I know that was a really long opener, but I think I'm going to call this video, I'm not sure yet, but essentially what we're going to be talking about is learning how to see, okay? So to sum up all of that I just shared with you all, that big tangent, coming back out of that rabbit hole there, we essentially need to shift our definition of intelligence, okay, from what we've stored in our memory to the capacity for objective observation. Objective observation. Okay, because when I say shifting our working definition that's active in our lives, right, from of intelligence, shifting it from what we've stored in our memory. See, that's the kind of stuff that we learn through the school system. Academics, the academic world conditions us to learn this way, and then we mistakenly, this is just my spin on things, please feel free to, you know, have your own opinion and do your own research and all that, but just from my point of view, this conditions us as far as how to think, and to assume that what we've stored in here is sufficient workable knowledge. It's like, oh, well, I already know XYZ about the world, about people, about, you know, people with bad intentions, predators, whatever. I already know, you know. So it's kind of like, I think that gives us this false sense of security, like I was saying, where you're just kind of operating like relaxed because you're confident in what you know. And then what happens? Well, somebody gets something over on you in plain sight and you don't catch it until hindsight. So you learn to be guarded. You learn to start this way. So you essentially have to admit that there are things you don't know. Again, it's that whole, I'll put the Bible verse down here. I can't remember what it is right this second, but it's, you have to, you know, unlearn. See, you have to kind of backtrack and then relearn. And so it's kind of like in school, a lot of what we learn is based on memorization, isn't it? It's all about how much we can cram into our memory and then recall for the test. And it's sad because I feel like a lot of us have to kind of learn just in the school of life, you know, what it means to actually do some critical thinking. It's like how to think. They teach us what to think instead of how to think. And so you know, when I was teaching, I taught art, elementary art for 6 or 7 years. I can't remember, but it's been a while back. But and I enjoyed it greatly. So, you know, there were kids that were coming into my art class, you know, 5th graders, and they were showing me their math homework they had to do, and they were like, check this out, you know, and it would just be this entire piece of paper with numbers everywhere to work out a simple math problem that you could just go, you know, 10 plus 15 is whatever, you know. And so, and I'm thinking, you know, your first reactive response is, that's ludicrous. Why would you do all that when it's just kind of like simple? And there were a lot of mixed opinions on it, and understandably so. And you know, I finally got to a point. Always watch your surroundings, y'all. I was hearing some stuff, but I got to a point where, you know, I kind of saw the value in that, because it, you know, and they had to work out the problem not only this big, long, exaggerated way, but that way plus this other way and plus this other way. So they were teaching them all the different approaches and different ways. And I thought, you know, now especially now from this viewpoint, I'm like, oh, I think there's value in that. You know, there's some value in it, as long as it's not overboard, you know. Again, it's kind of like expanding the mind, working the brain. And so teaching how to break something down and to think critically. So I was kind of impressed, because they didn't teach that stuff back when I was in elementary school. But yeah, so we learned that drawing upon what we see and hear is so important. What we see and hear is so important versus what others portray as fact or truth. You know, even if it's, I'm not talking about just in conversation with somebody else, but even if it's like in a book, a school book, a textbook, say. And so it's just, it's critical that we don't totally omit what's in front of our eyes, right? But yeah, it's kind of, I don't know if you feel this way, but after going through, you know, so much schooling with, you know, just your standard, and then, you know, just any kind of schooling beyond that, you know, training, whatever, you know, one goes through. It's like you realize that, yeah, you know, you're proud of you know, hanging in there and just sticking it out and getting all the way through, and you graduate. But it's like this accomplishment of graduating is just kind of hinging on your memorization skills, if they're good or not, a lot of times, you know what I mean? So we end up essentially lost, I feel like. The result is feeling lost in this ocean of information, you know? And if you think about it, an ocean of information that we're all operating from can create a lot of divide over just small things everywhere with everyone. It kind of creates groups, you know. If this group was trained this way and on this stuff, and this group was trained this way. I mean, just as a quick example, look at the different translations of the Bible. One word swapped out, you know, incorrectly, you know, placed in there like it's a synonym, when really it's not an exact alignment. It can totally change the meaning of the message, because it pulls everything out of context into a different context. So just that kind of a simple misalignment, see? And this is what I'm talking about, the difference between like truth or fact, you know, versus actual reality out here, you know, that you can touch and you can smell and you can see and hear with your senses. You know, that's the real. And I just want to remind you of that. I know you know it, but I have to remind myself of that too. Especially if you just enjoy learning and you just read a lot of books and stuff. Sometimes you can get caught up in your mind, but you know, just get outside some, walk around and just, you know, really see the sky in your world, and really see people, you know, without a preconceived opinion. Even if it's someone you've known for a long time, if you don't have the eyes to see what's objectively truly there in this person's character and who they are, you can be at risk. You can be vulnerable. And going through a really jarring experience can just it can strip that from you. It can strip this illusion from you, and you can just suddenly see a lot of people clearly. And you got to be strong. It's hard. It's not about judgment. It's about, that's another thing, see. Just be prepared if you haven't already experienced it. If there are people who have been hiding behind a veil of deception, and I'm talking people who have a great front, a great mask, and people like them and they're charismatic and all this stuff, okay? I'm talking about, you know, it's not obvious, but be prepared to be confronted if they see that you're awake, that you're getting the eyes to see. Even if you're not fully there yet, they're going to go ahead and be on the defense at that point. They're going to start posturing in that manner. And a lot of times what they can do is say, you know, even if it's kind of like beating around the bush, they can be like, if you're sharing just a little bit of insights, you know, not like in a gossipy kind of way, but if you're just sharing some things and they're like, well, I don't think that's cool, you know, to be judgmental or whatever, you know. And it's kind of like, well, I don't either, but there's a difference between being judgmental versus calling what's right there in front of you, or what you experienced firsthand, what it is. See? So to me, if you hear something like that from someone, it might indicate that they don't believe you. And that's okay. You know? You've got to be strong enough to stand on your own alone, because ultimately you're not alone. You have other people who are soldiers for the truth. And, you know, energetically, spiritually, we are shoulder to shoulder. And so, yeah, but the smallest things, you know, out in the world can divide people. I'm talking about people with good hearts, with good intentions. When everybody's operating from whatever coding they have, whatever textbook they have, you know, working. I'm thinking of like computers, our minds being computers, like whatever our hard drives are coded with, that kind of information or facts. See, so if everybody come together, as an example, with different coding, but they came together, they could just suddenly get into a bunch of different arguments over small things like semantics or whatever, you know. But then if everybody just stopped with, you know, coming from here and started coming from here, then everybody would be on the same page. Nobody could deny anything. Like if everyone was observing something in the moment together, we'd all be on the same page. See, objective versus subjective reality. That's where people who are deceptive, that's where they dance. That's their territory, is the subjective. And we all kind of do it, but those people exploit that, see, in us when we're unaware. So it's just it's being aware, it's being mindful of these things. I'm not even going off my notes, so I'm probably missing a whole lot. But, yeah. And the other thing is too, in psychological abuse, subjective reality, our subjective reality is actually constructed for us, so that this person can control you that way. You're controlled externally via the subjective reality that you've bought into. It's really just a web of lies, is one way to put it, right? That you've bought into it, you know, unknowingly. And this is not, all of this stuff talking about, you know, just people and stuff is never meant to come off as judgmental. It's meant to come off as trying to arm you with just information, just arm you with some things to think about, essentially, to get the wheels turning, like I'm always talking about on my channel, so that you can better protect yourself, so that you don't fall victim to someone who's wanting to exploit you, okay, or harm you in any way. So again, it's never about blaming, it's about introspection. That's what it's about, introspection. So yes, so I put, in psychological abuse, the subjective reality is constructed for you and controlled externally to the degree that you unconsciously betray yourself, because your awareness of what's right before your eyes has been stolen. It's that whole making you blind, right? It's kind of like it cuts off that sight for you. So it's why healing and learning starts with unlearning, like I talked about earlier, letting go of a false reality that you poured yourself into, and that's hard. But it never existed. Coming to terms with that it never existed. And again, this is it's just part of the reason why someone who hasn't gone through this firsthand will probably never be able to understand it, you know, the things you've been through. And it's really kind of a good thing. You don't want other people to have gone through what you've gone through, you know, but it makes it hard to relate to people sometimes if they just can't go there in their mind. It is isolating, and it can feel very lonely, unfortunately. But so I want to share an excerpt from this book. I've shared it before. It's right here, Inner Engineering. And if you have the book, it's going to be on pages 173 through 176. All right, so this section is it's in the chapter of the mind, but this section is called Soak the Intellect in Awareness. Soak the intellect in awareness. So it opens by talking about a yogic system of classification, and it says the mind has 16 dimensions. This is just another lens for you to you know, consider, to think about. It says these 16 fall into 4 categories. There is the discerning or discriminatory dimension of the mind, or the intellect, the accumulative dimension of the mind, or memory, which gathers information, and what is called awareness, which is beyond both intellect and memory. And then it says the fourth dimension, ahankara. We discussed earlier the aspect of the mind from which you derive your sense of identity. Really interesting. So then it elaborates on some of this, but I want to skip down to the bottom of page 173. It says, the problem of our times, however, is that the intellect has taken on a disproportionately important role. Modern education has encouraged a completely lopsided development of this aspect of the mind. The essence of the intellect is to divide. So humanity has embarked on a journey of wholesale division, discrimination, and dissection. We have split everything. Even the invisible atom has been split. Once you unleash the intellect, it splits everything it encounters. It does not allow you to be with anything totally. Just to be, right? To sit still, to allow that awareness to surface. It's like a numinous experience, right? And it can be uncomfortable for sure, for all of us. Not just someone who has some kind of, mental handicap or disorder, like a personality, not like someone with bad intentions. It can be uncomfortable for all of us to just really sit still, because if you've lived any extensive number of years or decades, whatever, you've been hurt. You've been hurt. We've all been hurt. And to sit with that is hard. When I go to yoga class, it's, when we don't do meditation or anything, we literally just sit, for a minute and get our breath and just get our mind, in a peaceful state. A lot of times we all come in there, rushed, and our shoulders are up to our ears and we're all tense and stressed. And, our instructor will talk us through just relaxing, and just taking some deep breaths, doing some breathing exercises to get the body prepared and in a state of, I've lost what I was talking about, of being able to just be. Being able to just be. And there's a relation, we've talked about this before in class, between holding tension in your body and not releasing totally these constricted muscles that are preventing you from stretching all the way out into a pose. And there's typically a correlation with a restriction in our mind, or emotional restriction, or constriction, I guess, where maybe the mind doesn't want to go there. Maybe you just went through something really tough, or there's something hanging in the balance, or there's something hinging on an outcome, and you're stressed about it, and you're worried, and you're kind of like, your body responds to that, whatever's going on in your mind. And so to consciously breathe deep and to release that tension in your body, you can have an emotional outpouring as well, because it's related, it's all connected. So it says, it was talking about the intellect. Once you unleash the intellect, it splits everything it encounters. It does not allow you to be with anything totally. And then it starts talking about yoga just a little bit. And then it says, the intellect is becoming a barrier because you keep it constantly dipped in the accumulative part of your mind, your memory, or manas. Examine this for yourself. You will find that every thought that arises in the mind has its roots in data you have already accumulated. The data may be gathered consciously or unconsciously. There's your conditioning. In any case, this basically means your intellect is perpetually immersed in the past. In such a state, nothing new is now possible. And so the intellect loses its edge and becomes a trap. The accumulative part of the mind is, to put it simply, just society's garbage bin. It is merely a heap of impressions you have gathered from outside. Anybody you encounter stuffs something into your head and moves on. And it's talking about all the people that we run into, It says you have the ability to process the information you receive, but that is all. Where there is comparison, there is always duality, which is really interesting. It says human perception through the sense organs is always piecemeal. It can give you an illusion of completeness, but can never comprehend the whole. I'm thinking of not being able to see the forest for the trees, that whole thing, right? Human perception through the sense organs is always piecemeal. I've already said that, sorry. So it says, what winds up happening, because we're fragmented, is that we draw conclusions about life that are completely distorted. Yes. And that's not even talking about emotions. Remember my t-shirt I shared with y'all? Emotions distort reality, and that's true. So you got that working against you too, right? So it talks about different aspects of our mind. Yes, it says it means talking about dividing everything into good and bad, right and wrong, high and low, heaven and hell, sacred and profane. Instead, all it means is learning to discern the real from the illusory, what is existentially true from what is psychologically true. Yes, if you soak your intellect in your awareness, being present, right? The discerning dimension of your mind can turn into a miraculous tool of liberation. It can become razor sharp, right? Slice through what is true and untrue and deliver you to a different dimension of life altogether. Learn to place your intellect in the sheath of your awareness rather than in the sack of memory and identification. Once you do, this tremendous instrument can cut its way effortlessly toward the ultimate. So I hope you enjoyed that. So our new goal is awareness, right? Paying attention to the here and now, and reviewing, or I guess just reviewing. I literally wrote re-review, I don't know, and reviewing the past without your blinders on now, right? Because you're strong enough. Your emotions are under control. You've dealt with stuff. You felt them. Don't ever, I'm not going to say don't ever, but to me, based on my experience and research, stuffing them down is not the way to process or deal with them or handle them, right? You have to feel them first. But once all that's been done, sometimes you have to feel your feelings when you don't even know what they're, tethered to or why they're there. I had to do that. I had to deal with my emotions first. And then these hard truths that I knew started to surface, and it was like, oh my gosh, I really should have honored myself, like my truth, that hurt back then or whatever, and a lot of times it can take sitting down with a therapist and sharing things with them and seeing their reaction, like, oh my gosh, you experienced that, and their reaction is weird to you because you've normalized things. You didn't have any context or perspective to compare your experience with others, and so you thought maybe everybody went through a particular experience. But yeah, looking back and reviewing your past without your blinders on, you can get new revelations that way, right? So awareness can be a large part of our armor. Okay, the ability to remain securely tethered to the objective reality in the present moment. Okay, so that when we are tempted with deception, we'll recognize it. We'll be able to catch it and avoid it. If you think about it, only concepts, mental type stuff, only concepts are elusive and wavering, right? Reality without judgment, it doesn't waver. So cultivating confidence here means there's no waffling. It's kind of like an approach that says it is what it is. So blockages to awareness, right? It's been said that oftentimes people remain in these less than favorable, to put it mildly, or abusive situations. They remain in these for a reason versus someone who doesn't. Like, there's a difference between someone who, like, we can all be deceived. Anybody can be deceived, but the difference between someone who stays and someone who doesn't is a lot of times people say it's related to unhealed trauma from your childhood or conditioning from your childhood that you haven't faced and addressed and resolved, right? So I think that's probably very true, that there, a lot of times we have this conditioning that we're unaware of. To live in the subjective reality to a degree. I think it's a spectrum. I don't think it's a, a totally in or totally out kind of thing. It's just, as far as objective and subjective reality, I think it's definitely a spectrum. But, because your subjective reality is kind of like an escape. You're not fully in the present, in the real, right? And that's what can be easily hijacked, essentially, by somebody looking to fool you, is that subjective reality, right? Because by hijacking that, they can now take possession of your awareness. So if you have a tendency toward like imagination, like a heavy tendency, if you're just a creative mind, just as part of who you are, I'm that way. That's something to just kind of be aware of. A lot of times if you have your head in the clouds, you're daydreaming a lot or whatever it is, you're just thinking up some great stuff, for your next painting project or whatever you're going to do, your story, people can see this avenue to try to enter into your realm and bypass your armor, okay? So subjective reality, to me, that's where you can get hijacked. And imagination, let me just say, is not a bad thing. It's an awesome thing, in my opinion. I mean, think about visionaries, right? Visionaries use that gift of an imaginative mind to create wonderful things that benefit people, but just be careful, just be aware to discern between objective and subjective lenses when you're out and about in the world. Maybe just preserve that, or reserve that subjective imaginative time for your close inner circle, of friends that you can let your guard down around and be with. Just be on guard. That's just what I want to say, right? So I'm thinking about Van Gogh. I don't even know why I wrote this. I'm thinking about, I think it's called Starry Night, his painting with the sky, how it was like alive. It's like it was dancing. It's a painting, but it looks alive. It's the coolest thing, right? And so, but Van Gogh, I mean, he cut his ear off. I don't know if you knew that, but I know it's a pretty, widely known thing, but so it's, subjective reality. You can get lost in it. And I actually did a video on creative minds, because that's, near and dear to my heart. It resonates with me. And, the balance between the subjective and the objective reality in relation to someone with a creative mind. But I didn't post it. I didn't post that video. I made it a couple of weeks ago. But I just didn't feel like it was totally complete or well thought out. So I just kind of, and I'm still thinking about that playlist I mentioned to y'all, where I might call it like, I don't know. But, and that's just like, the possibly subpar videos, just kind of like my, what do you call it? My musings or whatever. If you just want more of my kind of ramblings or whatnot, you can just hit that playlist, but I haven't made it yet, so I might. But, yeah, I just want to wrap this up by saying, I just want to encourage you to observe yourself and ensure that you are in the here and now as much as possible. And yes, it can be painful, and that just means we have stuff to work on. It's just a work in progress. I mean, we're perfectly imperfect, all of us are, but if there's pain when you're being present and you're not constantly busy or whatnot, then it's a messenger. That pain is your inner messenger system trying to alert you that, hey, there's something here that needs to be worked through. Okay, well then let's do it. Your life is worth the effort, to get through that. And it's not the pain, I don't think, will ever completely go away. It's just that you come to terms with it, and you come to a good place where it's it is what it is, and it's not obstructing the flow of your life anymore. See, now you can actually sit and breathe and relax, pull the shoulders down and breathe and enjoy the present moment without this pain in the way, right? So yes, so all the things we need to do to make sure that our vision isn't obstructed. It's not just our vision, but all of our senses, right? So that we can truly be on alert, to be watchful, It's like, how can we be on guard if the guard isn't even watching? Let's just kind of shift this over into story form real quick. Imagine a guard in your mind that's supposed to be protecting you, okay? Your own personal guard, like literal. We're going to personify this role, okay? And so let's say that you hire this person. Great reviews, great, totally dedicated, on time, just maybe with you 24/7, whatever. Just paint this picture in your mind, right? Your own personal movie, or daydream. So let's say this guard protects you by textbook. In other words, they know the facts of, where the danger might be. And so imagine how they would operate that way versus just being, open to any possible threat from any direction, anytime. I mean, which way are you going to feel more secure? It's like going by the textbook, knowing the facts. It's like that's going to essentially make this guard blind to unidentified or unrealized threats, new threats that haven't been identified yet, seen. So, and think about, you can apply this logic, as you're observing a lot of different areas in society, and you're like, oh man, you can kind of see that way of thinking, that logic, in groups and industries and stuff. And all it takes is someone who's a critical thinker, without that subjective reality, lens on, to just go in and go, boop, and just pop that bubble like that. Yeah, but what about this? Bam. And so you have to think like that to understand that there's things that you may not know yet. And that seems kind of like common sense. But it's one of those things that when you hear it said, you're like, yeah, I know, but are you operating that way? So just consider that, as you're operating in this world with regards to your armor and keeping yourself on guard and secured, right? Because if you don't, if you're just operating thinking you already know all the ways somebody might approach you to exploit you or take advantage of you, I just think it's a recipe for disaster. I really do, potentially. At some point, it just makes you vulnerable. So, yeah. So, we talked about hiding in plain sight and all that. So, yes. And so, as we get older, we get wiser. But ideally, we can share some insight with one another and get the wheels turning for one another so that we can just be on guard and learn that way as opposed to learning the hard way, and having to experience even more hurt and more exploitation and all these other things. So I hope that this has been beneficial for you. I hope that it has got the wheels turning as always. I hope that it's given you just a fresh, new perspective to continue to build on and have and receive those eyes to see, and to just therefore produce a better quality of life for all of us, right? So thanks so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.